Now let's talk about Jack Starr, one of my favorite people in the scene, a fantastic guitar player. Recently had him on the show for an interview. Many of you saw that interview. Jack is a really cool dude, a really fun guy to talk to, and probably one of the most versatile guitar players I have ever heard. The man can play, the guy actually can play some really great blues guitar. He's a really fantastic blues guitar player. Listening to some of the past projects he's been a part of, he can play thrash metal, as crazy as that might sound to some of you. But where he has excelled the best is classic American hard rock and American power metal. I think that's where his niche is. And his new album, Out of the Darkness Part 2, I think is excellent. So there are a couple interviews with Jack on my podcast. I have a couple older ones from, maybe 10, 11 years ago that I can put up there as well. We had some great interviews together over the years on my radio show. But this new album, Out of the Darkness Part 2, is pretty good. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, it is a very diverse album. Most of Jack's albums are, usually power metal oriented, and this has some of that, but there's a lot of other types of heavy metal being played here. Like the very first song, Hand of Doom. I keep thinking of the Black Sabbath song. Maybe there was something behind that. It's great. It has like more of a Black Sabbath doom metal vibe. Rise Up is more of an anthemic, classic American hard rock song. That's the video. That was the first single they put out. But generally speaking, there's a lot of variety on this album. Now, the biggest compliment you can pay a record, one of the biggest compliments you can pay a record, is to say that after you hear one song, it leaves you wanting more. And that's what this album does. Interestingly enough, as you get into the album, it gets better as you get into it. I think the second half of the album is a little better than the first half. Even the bonus tracks on it are really, really good. But generally speaking, this is a pretty good record. Now, what helped make this album as good as it is? Jack's certainly a wonderful songwriter. He has always written great stuff. But one of the things that really, really made this album great was the fact he brought Giles Lavery in. Giles, of course, sings with Alcatraz, Warlord, and has a new album coming out with a band called Dragon's Claw. But Giles is a guy, as I've said before in this show, that has that classic American power metal voice. He's not from the States, but he has that kind of voice. But the other talent that he does have is the fact that he is great at writing vocal melodies. He's absolutely fantastic at that. And that was one of the things that I noticed, especially when it comes to the vocal harmonies on many of the songs on the album. So I brought this up to Jack Starr. I talked to him about Giles and what it was like working with him. And here's what Jack had to say. This is from the interview we just did. Check this out. You picked Giles Lavery. Giles is a really good dude. I've always liked him. I think his voice is like a perfect representation of, what power metal from the U.S. would sound like. And I know you spoke highly of him in the previous interview that we did. And what made you ask Giles to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you sing on this record?
Well, number one, I heard what he did with Alcatraz, which was brilliant. And then I also heard what he was doing with Warlord, recently. And again, that was great. So I'm thinking, Giles is the kind of singer that can really cover both bases. He can be like an epic, and he is an epic, metal singer along the lines of, like Jeff Tate and people like that, or even my previous singer, Todd Michael Hall or Mike Torelli. He can do all that. He can hit the really stratospheric notes, but he can also do the other stuff. He can get gritty and give us, that Rhett Forrester in your face, kind of almost like Bon Scott, meets David Coverdale, but maybe a little bit more Bon Scott. And so he can do both. And I thought, this doesn't have to limit me if we did this album, with Giles, because if there are songs that are in one particular genre, he could nail that, and vice versa if we do something else.
Right.
So the key word was versatility.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that I think that he's always done a great job of, and he came on my show in that weird impromptu interview we did, the kind of last minute type thing. I talked about one of the things that I like about him is as a singer, he is able to take an idea or a melody and really kind of add something to it in any band he's ever been in. And I think he did a lot of that. When I heard, weirdly enough, I heard the single, but when I heard some of the other tracks, I was like, I could just feel that. And it kept it really his voice and his way of doing things, I think, is a perfect match for your songwriting. And I think, and I think that it really resonated really well with me. Just the way he helped place some of the vocal melodies that, you had probably come up for him, and refined that. I think he did an outstanding job. And I think that is where there's a huge difference with him in the band, from that standpoint, as well as singing.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to have somebody that just yeses you. Oh, everything is great, and you want someone that puts in an equal amount of creativity and ideas, and that's what Giles does. He kind of actually challenges you to think about some of your parts, and then because he might come up with an alternative, which at first, it's like, oh, I don't want anybody messing with my baby. But then you listen to it and it's like, wait a minute, hey, he's onto something. So yes, and that's what I like about Giles. The bottom line is the guy can sing. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of guys that have a lot of some of the prerequisites. Like they look good, or they have good stage presence, or they I don't know, or whatever. Giles can do all of that, and he can sing. So damn, what a concept.
Jack Starr talking about Giles Lavery, why he picked him to sing on this album, and of course, what it was like working with him. Now, I decided to ask Giles Lavery earlier in the year about this same exact thing. I said, Giles, I think you did a great job, putting the vocal melodies on this. And this is what Giles had to say when we did kind of our impromptu interview a while back. Check this out. So one of the things I just said on a episode of the podcast, when I heard the song that you did, and a little bit of a preview of some of the other songs on the album, I noticed one thing that was a difference between this record and a lot of the other records he's done, even the last one. And I've noticed this in Warlord, because I own all the Warlord albums. You came in, and I think that you have always had this talent for coming up with really, really good vocal melodies on the top of these songs. It's like you kind of take that to a different level than most people would. Now, I also said that I think Jack Starr is like one of the perfect, or as I call it, he's like one of the gold standard examples of what American power metal would sound like. And I told you this in a message, that you are like perfect for that kind of music. And when I heard this, it was, I expected this to be really good. I was shocked that it's up, probably has gone up another level from that.
Wow.
I think, and I really say that because I think that you two together, as musicians, I think you just fit so well together. Just much like you fit with Bill Samos's writing with Warlord. So a lot of the stuff on the last Warlord album, that was one of the things that I noticed about that. And I noticed that with you and Jack Starr as well. But when you sing, your singing voice is really just suited to this kind of American style power metal. And this is my initial reaction. But like I said, I was like, damn, I told you, I'm like, man, I want to listen to more of this, right? So I think that you two make a really, really great team together. And, those were my initial thoughts. And I figured I'll let you respond from there.
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for the kind words and the compliment. And I just plugged my phone in because I realized I was down to 10%. So I'm hoping that's charging. But yeah, just to reference what you said, first of all, thank you. And the vocal melodies, I grew up with bands like Foreigner and Survivor, Journey, every bit as much as I grew up with Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, who also had great melodies and hooks and choruses and interesting vocal parts and putting a high octave with a lower octave to create that, like what Halford would do, a lot. And
yeah.
And harmony vocals and just dropping a harmony in on a line in a verse can make it just sound so much more interesting than just singing it straight through. So I've always been very conscious of that, to try and whether I succeed or fail from one song to the next, my effort that I put forth, my goal rather, is every word that I sing, every word, I try and make it sound interesting.
Correct.
Like if I sing the, do, go, this, that, I at least try and make it sound like a good that, or a good this, or a good, I don't want any kind of filler takes where, you hear a lot of records where certain words in a line haven't been given that attention and certain words have. I try and make sure every word, at least if you were to isolate that word, has a certain element of conviction, character, color, tone, or uniqueness to it, so that when you put it all together, it's even if you didn't like it, at least it's interesting, if you know what I mean. So keeping in mind, I also, hooks, melodies, or, something memorable. And something, when you're doing a session, when you're singing someone else's material, you are obviously limited in a lot of ways to the way they want it sung. At least make it sound like there's a certain amount of conviction or interest on the part of the singer. But Jack was actually very... He said, look, just change a few words if you have to. Because guitar players generally can't write for singers. They put too many words in, a lot of the time. They put way too many words in, and you lose that melody because you need... It's like a guitarist sometimes put too many notes in. If you have a chorus where you have the big balloon chords, the big da, 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 the singer can go any place. But if you've got you've pretty much got no choice but just to follow that. So it's the same with words. If there's too many words, you can't structure a melody. So Jack said, hey, modify the words, modify the line, modify the melody if you want. Do something if you feel like you can, if you feel like you can improve it. And in some cases I felt I could. In other cases I thought what Jack had done was ideal.
Right.
So that's where the collaboration came from, I think. He wrote the lyrics and he wrote the music, but he left that door open for me to change the cadence, the melody, the phrasing, the, et cetera, et cetera. So I was grateful for that, because it can be a bit of a drag when you get like, Melody Mike who goes, don't change my, I've had some sessions where it's like, don't change my melody, don't change the cadence, don't change the phrasing. And well, then you should just sing it, because I'm my own singer and I'm unique, because every singer is unique unto themselves. It doesn't matter whether it's a death metal band or whatever.
Yeah.
Every vocalist is unique. And just to totally do a carbon copy of someone else's performance, it's really, I find that some people are very good at that, and it's a real gift, but I find it really hard. I need to have that freedom to, put my own thing into it. And Jack allowed me to do that, and for that I was very grateful.
Yeah, I think you just have a vision for that. I mean, it's I guess if you're not a musician, it's hard to explain it, but you just have a vision of almost like, and you're a big music fan, like I am. And the way I've
Yeah.
always approached that is, what would I want to hear if someone, if I were somebody listening to this record, right? But you have a very good vision as to where, you talked about each word having its own conviction. You're very good about placing that word and that melody and that note right where it needs to be. And I think like I said, the combination of you and Jack with this music, I think is outstanding. And I was a little bit blown away by that, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because his songwriting, which I've always liked, and I think you, in placing your vocal melodies where they are, I just think it just works. I think the album's going to probably be received better than you probably think it will. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, that yeah, and you never know, because sometimes you do what you think's an amazing record, and people
Right.
go, yeah, that's nice, that's cool, yeah, that's all right. And then other times you do a record that you just think, oh, well, we got to the end of that one, okay, and then people love it.
Yeah.
Again, it comes from sort of different places as well. I mean, soul music is very vocal. I mean, that's very vocal orientated, with certain lines and words become, an intrinsic part of the rhythm and the feel of everything. And theater, if you go to see a theater production,
Right.
it's very important in that sense as well. And I like to listen to different singers and different types of music. So there's probably all sorts of stuff kind of floating around up here, and it comes out here,
Sure.
and that, and some of it may be instinctive, some of it may just be a homogenization of, all kinds of different things, that I've picked up over the years. I tend to say usually we owe it all to Lou Gramm, and if you spoke to him, he'd probably say he owes it all to Sam Cooke or Paul Rodgers or whoever his influences are. So,
Sure.
It's, we're all kind of this amalgamation of, things we've picked up over the years, but that's the things I look out for, is just to make things sound interesting. It doesn't have to be completely, totally original. At least it has to be interesting.
Giles talking about Jack Starr and working with him, and me asking him that same thing I asked Jack. I said about him being great with a lot of the vocal melodies and really being able to come up with great vocal melodies for this album. So some of my favorite songs off the album, A Night Has a Thousand Eyes. I think that is actually probably my favorite song on the album. The album after it, song after it, Sahara Winds, I think is an awesome song. A Hand of Doom, the first song, I think is awesome. The one bonus track, I have to go look at the name of it really quick. Savage at the Gate. That song is incredible. And then, of course, you have the single called Rise Up, a really great anthemic styled song. And what I did was I asked Jack, I said, Jack, what did you write this song about? And here's what he had to say. Check this out. The first single called Rise Up. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is that song about? Like, I mean, because I know Giles referred to you as somebody writing, the lyrics to, the songs on the record. And what was that song about? And why did you pick that as the first single?
Well, I felt that song makes a statement, to people to not be complacent and to not always follow orders, so they need to make their voices heard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a call for people, it's not Street Fighting Man 40 years later. It's basically telling people, hey, think for yourself. We have a very strong mass media in America, and it pushes very hard for people to comply and think a certain way. And I think in heavy metal and in rock, it gives people an alternative. It's like when you listen to this subculture, which it is, because it's not, Barry Manilow, and it's not winning Grammy Awards or Lady Gaga or whoever's. I don't even know who these people are, to be honest with you. I think so. I don't know who they are, but whoever they are, and I wish them all the best. This is an alternative culture,
Mhm.
And I'm just saying, I want to be part of that, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And rise up, make your voice heard. You don't have to, you don't have to be, part of the sheep, or the sheeple or whatever, So that's what that song is about. And, in the lyrics, rise up, make a stand, it's really about that.
And that is where Jack talks about the first single from the album. Again, really great record. Giving it a rating out of 10. I give it a 9 out of 10. It's definitely very good. I like it better than the last Jack Starr's Burning Star album that came out not long ago. But very, very good record. Production sounds very good. And of course, it's coming out on Brave Words Records, which has a great team of people behind it. So definitely a really tremendously awesome record. And again, 9 out of 10 from me. I think the album's great. There'll be a link in the show notes to pre-order the album and a link to the song Rise Up. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.